Welcome to the Actors Career Compass, where we help aspiring screen actors find high-quality auditions, sign with great agents, and book major roles in legit productions. I'm your host, Martin Benson, and today I'll be talking with Corey Anker. He's a longtime friend of mine, and he's an executive coach and life recovery coach. Today, he's going to be sharing some of his most powerful insights for actors who want to stay strong and confident through the ups and downs of this business. Corey Anker has been a full-time executive coach and a life and recovery coach for over 15 years. As a creative who helped represent top clients, including Julia Roberts, Jennifer Lopez, and Tim Robbins, along with various TV and Broadway projects, and who had a 20-year voiceover career of his own, he's learned how to partner with leaders, executives, and creative professionals to help them navigate obstacles and create the most satisfying, successful versions of themselves. After living his whole life in and around New York City, Corey now lives on the East Coast of South Florida with his wife and 3 children. Thanks so much for joining me, Corey. I'm very excited to chat.
Great to see you, Martin. It's always a pleasure. How you doing?
Well, Corey and I have known each other for many years, and rereading your bio there kind of reminded me of the early morning BNI meetings, Business Network International, where we'd be meeting at like 6 a.m. in Union Square. Those are some crazy times.
The best jokes. I love your jokes. They were always funny. They cracked me up.
Oh, yeah. Well, I have a number of questions for you because people who are listening to this, actors for the most part, deal with a lot of emotional roller coaster type stuff in this crazy career, right? And so as someone who works with people as a life coach, you kind of deal with stuff like that and you help them work through problems and challenges and everything. So my first question that I want to ask you about is related to rejection, right? So, if an actor, let's say, is doing an audition for a role, or even in some cases, just not hearing back at all, right? They're submitting to things and they just never get auditions, or they're reaching out and it's like an agent that they've been dying to get an interview with and they just don't hear anything back, and they have those little red receipts set up on their email so they can see that the email was open, right? But they just don't hear back. You get this rejection feeling, right? And it can hit really hard sometimes. So I'm just curious, what are some good ways for actors to process that type of disappointment without letting it spiral into self-doubt?
Well, that's a good question. And obviously, when you're in this field, this profession, rejection is a very interesting bag. Speaking from my own experience, I actually did a pretty good job of not being too caught up in getting the role. I mean, any performer worth their salt that's been around for a while knows you're going to book less than you don't. Kind of like in baseball, if you bat 300, you make the Hall of Fame, but that means that you failed 7 out of 10 times. Very, very few fields allow you to fail 7 out of 10 times and actually be a rock star. But it's just, that's the thing. But what I found is the closer you get to the gig, the much harder it is to avoid that rejection feeling. Because if you're one of 100, or sometimes the casting directors cast nationally or even internationally of thousands, you kind of know that the numbers game says, there's a good chance you're not going to get it. But then you get the call back and now you're excited, but you've got a better shot. And then if you get a second call back and then they narrow it down to 3 and then you don't get it, and really what we're talking about here is attachment versus a commitment, right? So whatever the commitment is for you, it's getting that role, it's being a star, it's having a chance to express yourself on a stage or on a screen, or like I did as a voiceover artist on the mic. You're going to get your reps in. If you stay with it long enough and you take on whatever training you feel you need and you have representation and you get in the door, you're gonna eventually book jobs. The key is to do the best you can, not to be attached to that particular role. I always knew that if I walked into a casting room if by the time I got to the elevator, I couldn't even tell you anymore the lines I read and who I met and what the project was, then I was in good shape. But if I got home and my friends or my wife or whatever, and I'm still telling them, oh, you should, it was there, if I'm still talking about it and thinking about it, I'm in trouble because I'm attached to something that's really beyond my control. I could control the performance I gave in the room, but you really just, and you don't even know why they're taking you or not. It could be based on merit and talent. It could also be like, it could be superficial. Maybe they're in a bad mood that day. Maybe your first name is the same name of their ex-boyfriend or girlfriend, and like they just are annoyed at you. They didn't like the color shirt you were wearing into the audition room. So we got to know what we can control and what we can't control. And to drill down just a little further at what you asked, because you said, how do you not let it spiral into self-doubt? There's a big difference between who we are and what we do. So sure, you're going to make mistakes at times. You're going to, blow the audition, they're going to give you feedback and like, you're going to try to implement it and you kind of miss the mark and you leave and you're like, and in your heart of hearts, like you remember what they said and you remember what you did and it didn't match. And mistakes are going to happen, but just because you make a mistake or you blow an audition, that doesn't mean that you are inherently a bad performer or not smart or not talented or not capable. So you just have to it's really, I think, largely about perspective. And if you lose your way and you forget who you are, the people in your life that you can trust, who can reflect back to you your greatness. And I suggest whether that's time with yourself or time with those people, lick your wounds, heal, get with those people, remember who you are, get recentered and regrounded, and just get back in the game. And as long as you stay in the game, you'll be fine. You'll get your reps in, and you will get jobs. And as the cliche is, there's no small roles, just small actors, right? So
I love
anyway,
it. Definitely really good advice there. I think it's it's definitely important as well to make sure, as you said earlier, it's kind of like you got to take a lot of swings, like in baseball, right? And sometimes what can happen is an actor might only get a few auditions a year or something, right? And if you're barely auditioning at all, then when, of course, that opportunity comes, it does hurt a lot more. And if you have consistent auditions going on and you're submitting yourself consistently, or you're working with an agent and you're making sure that your materials and everything is strong and they're doing a good job, then you should see a lot more auditions. And then you almost, in a sense, you're already starting to prepare for the next one. And so you can't keep it in your head and worry about it so much and everything. So it's definitely, though, easier said than done. And so mastering, as you're saying, the mental framework and, getting out of this, oh my gosh, everything is based on this. That's like a critical thing because you can't even start to focus on getting more auditions until you master the mental side. So all the stuff that you talked about is super important. And it kind of leads me to my next question here. Uh, Actors, right? Whether you're, let's say, auditioning for something and you're starting to get some feedback or notes from the casting director, or you're in a class and something just like isn't connecting well, or even you booked a role and it's like difficult to work with people, right? So from your coaching experience, what are some ways that actors can deal with difficult or tough personalities, right? Directors, teachers, scene partners, while at the same time staying professional and centered?
how to like deal with difficult people? You
Yeah,
mean?
yeah, exactly. Like you might be in an audition room or doing a live audition, let's say, right, on Zoom. And you might find that like the casting director just kind of seems, let's say, either like very, I don't know, like unfriendly or
Yes.
direct,
Oh
and
my
it's
God.
almost
This
like
is
you're
great.
taking it personally, or they're just like giving you too many complicated things, and you're kind of like, how do you deal or recommend that people deal with situations like that?
This is a great question because I had mentioned to you before we even got on that I had put together a presentation for what was really business owners and entrepreneurs, but I think that it actually speaks directly to the center of the bullseye of what you're asking. So I actually want to, if it's okay, and feel free to cut me off at any moment, but I want to share just a little bit of content that I had put together earlier this week, because it literally, it's called Difficult People Find the Gold. And I just want to share this because I think, listen, this is just human nature, right? So, every entrepreneur, every leader, every business owner, every performer, no matter your industry or your level of success, you eventually run into the same challenge, which is difficult people. So, maybe it's a demanding client who always wants more from you, or a customer who complains about everything, or a casting director who just seems to not really, they're communicating in a way that like, it's hard for you to process, and you're trying to like clarify, but they're not even like demonstrating a willingness to kind of partner with you and explain what's going on. And it's tempting at times for us to think, if only they would change, my life would be easier. But the truth of the matter is, difficult people aren't the problem. It's how we respond to them that determines everything. Because in every challenging interaction lies an opportunity. It's an opportunity to lead, to grow, to show who we truly are is really what matters most. So there are a couple things that I think are good to keep in mind when you're up against dealing with these difficult people. One of those things is really to do our best to stay grounded and to separate emotion from what we're observing. When somebody's upset or rude or unreasonable, our instinct oftentimes is to react. We might get defensive, we might try to shut them down or prove that we're right. Obviously, can't do that with a casting director, but just in life in general. But reacting emotionally never leads to a resolution. It tends to only add fuel to the fire. So the thing for us to do is instead to step back, take a breath, and just observe what's really going on. Because behind every difficult behavior is usually a fear in that other person of being ignored or misunderstood or losing control. When you can see past the words and recognize their emotion, we can begin to actually understand the person. And when people feel understood, they start to soften. Another thing to consider is really just active listening, like really listening to them with empathy and intention, which can be hard because they're being kind of a jerk. But most people don't actually really want to be right. They just want to be heard. And the simple act of listening can turn an adversary into an ally. So what I say to try is, after they speak, try to just reflect back what you heard. It sounds like, X, but I heard Y. You're not agreeing with them necessarily, but you're acknowledging them, and acknowledgement is power. It tells people you matter and I hear you, and that alone can create space and shift the entire tone of the conversation. A third thing to think about is certainly to lead with calm, confident boundaries. I think too many people fall into the trap of thinking that saying yes to everyone, even as a performer, right? We're running around, we're accepting anything they give us last second, whatever. We think that that'll lead to success. But if we say yes everywhere at all times, that often ends up saying no to ourselves. And it's really the fastest route to burnout and resentment. And so while, yes, we need to be open, certainly when our casting directors say like, hey, can you be there for whatever? Of course, boundaries aren't walls. They're really the framework of respect. And they communicate honestly, hey, here's how best we can work together. So don't be afraid to stand up in the places that are appropriate to say, hey, look, this is what's going to work best for me. And fourth, it's important to shift focus from blame to solutions. Whenever tension rises between us and other people, it's easy to get caught in the loop of like, who messed up or why did this happen? But leaders don't waste energy assigning fault. They direct it toward resolution. So it's important for us to ask, what can we learn? What can we do next time? Because every problem is really an access point to improvement. And when people see that your focus is on progress and not punishment, they're far more likely to work with you than against you. And the final thing I want to say is, it's important that we try and see every difficult person as a mirror, as really a teacher in disguise, because ultimately they are. Every challenging person offers a chance to strengthen our patience, sharpen our communication, and expand our emotional intelligence. They're going to test our ability to stay grounded under pressure, the very qualities that separate, the good performer and the good business owner from like somebody who's really a great leader. So the next time you find yourself dealing with someone difficult, just remember, you're not being tested to see if you can win an argument. You're being invited to rise, to lead with grace under pressure, to choose composure over reaction, and to transform tension into trust. We can't always change the person, but we can control the energy that we bring into the room. And when we do that consistently, we become known as the calm in the storm, the leader or the performer that can handle anything. And that presence is what builds real influence, real trust, and lasting success in any field, including acting and performance. So don't just deal with difficult people, use them to sharpen your skills, deepen your patience, and strengthen your ability. Because in business and life and performance, it's not the easy people who shape us, it's the difficult ones who prepare us for greatness.
I love that. Definitely useful stuff there because it reminded me of a conversation that I was literally just having with my team before we started our interview. And one of my team members had brought up she runs the headshot studio, City Headshots, and so she's like, "Yeah, how do we set like boundaries with clients who are really difficult? We have clients who like," and she's like, "Just today, this guy showed up 45 minutes late to a 20-minute shoot. Like, what do I do? Do I just say no? Do I charge him extra?" And we're still kind of figuring these things out and working through the exact solutions. We didn't have time to come up with an exact answer yet. But I think that I would love for you to send what you have over to me personally so I can share that with my team because I think that they'll find it useful. And B, it's sort of as you're saying, right? You're learning how to grow and deal with these things. And I like to kind of think of it as whether it's a casting director or even an agent, the stakes are much lower, most likely at this point in your career than, let's say, 5, 10 years from now when you're much further along. So the sooner that you learn how to deal with these situations and you gain the confidence and everything to work through this with people, the more prepared you'll be for when the stakes are much higher down the line.
Yes, I think that's all very true, and I will send the content over to you. I also would say that one place to look for anybody is it's less. Sometimes we get to these crossroads. It's like, right, do we let him get away with having the shoot anyway, or do we kick him to the curb and say like you'll have to come back or whatever, right? And I think it's less about whether we let them shoot the thing or not. Although of course there are circumstances you have to factor in, like is there a client coming in the door like in 5 minutes, and obviously if circumstances don't allow for it, then the decision is made for you. But if you really could go either way and you're just like, is this a bad look for us because we're showing him that he could just get away with anything, or whatever. I think it really comes down to intentionality and whether we're doing something on purpose, sort of on our toes and in a proactive, purposeful sense, or whether we're doing it from a fear on our heels in sort of a reactive place. Because I say that it's more important whether you say, yes, let him come in and shoot this, or actually it'll be better to send him and we'll reschedule him. I'd much rather see, it doesn't really matter which of those you choose. I would just rather see you pick the thing that's like purposeful, that it actually serves something. Because if you want to be, for example, generous and understanding and considerate, and that means for you to say, hey, we can afford to let him shoot this, it's not going to harm our day, we're available, then choose that. And if you're saying, you know what, this has happened too much, or this guy's done this before, and I don't feel that we should continue to let him take advantage of us, so we're going to choose on purpose to say, hey, let's give him some consequences here and let him come back, then that's fine. But what I wouldn't want to see is, you know, shooting the shoot in a rush because you're afraid to say no.
Mm.
Because we do need to put up appropriate boundaries. And remember, a boundary isn't a wall that I place in your face. A boundary is, sort of an envelope that I'm putting in front of my face. I'm saying this is what I am willing to accept in my space, but I'm not willing to let you come in past this point to me. So it's not me controlling you and your actions, like, hey, you shouldn't do that and you're not allowed and you're a bad person. It's just saying this is what I can tolerate, and anything beyond this just doesn't work for me, you know? So really it's about choosing something on purpose. Do I send the email? Do I not send the email? Like, should I send, I already contacted them. Can I reach out again? Can I not? It doesn't really matter. What matters is, what is the thing that really serves the moment, you know?
Mhm. Excellent.
Let that be the North Star and the guiding force behind it, rather than just getting caught at that crossroads being like, oh, I don't know, I don't know, I don't know, like
That makes sense.
choose and move on.
My next question here, you've coached a lot of people across
Mhm,
different industries.
mhm.
What are some habits or daily practices that you see in people who wind up, staying like grounded, staying consistent, moving things forward, even when things move really slowly, or it can kind of feel like they're almost like taking steps backwards sometimes?
Well, I think first of all, it's important to have a strong foundation under ourselves. If you whether it's an acting career or a family or a business or really anything, if you would like to build a tower up to the sky, you better make sure you have a deep foundation that's going under the ground. And so it's important to make sure that our needs are met, and that's our physical needs. Make sure you're fed, that you're rested, that your body functions well. So in whatever form you choose, that you don't just sit all day, but you like exercise or take a walk, or we really want our physical needs to be met, that our mental, emotional, and social needs are met, because when we're whole and complete, we're able to move through the world with agency, and we become a bit more Teflon. That when energies and forces like not getting apart, or somebody's tone of voice, or not holding the door for us, or whatever it may be, it rolls off. If we don't take care of ourselves, what's likely to happen is that these little, sometimes big, but sometimes little gestures or places where people fall short, if we're not taking care of ourselves, we start to inadvertently put pressure on the outside world and the people in it to care for us. So now, it's not just, well, gee, it'd be nice if you held the door for me. It almost crosses over into like, you owe me this. And if you don't hold the door for me, now I'm resentful of you. But if I'm in a good spot, I don't need you to hold the door for me. It's no problem. If you do, it's a bonus and thank you. And if you don't, like, I'll open my own door. And of course I'm being literal, but I'm also being figurative at the same time, right? Opening that door could be literally anything at all as we move through the world. So, and part of this is, I think anything that you can routinize is good. That doesn't mean you have to micromanage every moment or every 5-minute increment of your day. But I do think things that you can repeat and rely on are effective because they take up less bandwidth. It's sort of like when you're a kid and you learn how to get dressed, it's like one sock and then the other sock and then a shoe. And then now you probably don't even think about it. You just like, oh, you have to make plans with someone and you're just like, hey, I'm going to get ready and I'll meet you there. You just think of it as a larger chunk. And so if you can create a routine, you don't have to spell out your day. It's like, you can just speak it out in a way, and you can just go through your day and know this is the thing that I'm going to do. And it does, whatever aspect of that, nutrition, motion, journaling, I don't know, whatever it is for you, as long as it's meeting your needs and it's creating a foundation on which you can rely, that is going to set you up for success. It'll also free up energy and bandwidth for you to apply, to new and distinct things that come into your day, because if you can get the little things right, you've got a shot at getting the bigger things right. If we don't handle the little things, it's a lot harder to handle the big things. And it's really, in closing, I'll just say, like, it's about self-integrity. If you think of a boat that has a hull that's solid, just moves through the water smoothly, gracefully. It doesn't have a lot of drag. But the moment spaces occur in the planks, or a hole, holes in the steel, it may not sink right away, although it might eventually, but it creates drag, it slows down, it gets heavier. It's just not effective. So we want to take care of ourselves.
That's so interesting that you say that. It actually kind of reminds me of something that I I actually sent an email out to the list and I did a podcast, I think, on this almost maybe a year ago at this point. But the email that went out to the list was very recent, maybe just a few weeks ago. And specifically about like how I was talking about how in the evenings I kind of have this routine. My wife, I would always notice her. She would come home like as soon as she gets home from work, unless we had to go out somewhere, she would like instantly change into her like pajamas or something, right? I was like, wow, like you look so comfortable, and I'm like sitting there wearing my like dress pants and everything from the day. And uh anyway, so I decided to just sort of test that out. And I really liked it. And so then I went and decided to buy some more like comfortable clothes and different things. And now, like every day, depending on whatever time I'm pretty much done for the day, I'll change. And I even, well, I'll actually get to this in a second. But the whole point is it started giving me a lot more comfort and allowed me to sort of recharge myself and then be ready the next day to tackle things with, let's say, a more solid hull, like you're talking about, right? But sometimes what I think that people might worry about or wonder about is like, well, there's costs to stuff like this. Like, oh, Martin, like you went out and bought yourself some new clothes or whatever. Maybe, that's like expensive, or what are things that do I need to like spend money or like put a whole bunch of effort and stuff into this? And I would say, first, it's really important to find out what actually makes you feel like you have a stronger whole, because a lot of people, they might hear that in our like interview right now and just be like, oh yeah, that's interesting. But it's like, actually like stop and think, like pause this, spend a few minutes and think like what would make you feel more satisfied in your life. What are some things that are like annoyances that if you could kind of get rid of them would make things sail much more smoothly, you know? And then ask yourself, like, maybe it doesn't have to be as expensive as you think. Like, for instance, I was like, oh, I want to buy a few things. So at first I was like, oh, like these clothes are super expensive. But then I was able to find things like doing some extra research that was, more affordable and actually kind of covered the same things that I wanted. And so I maybe spent like $100 or something. Again, money or time and effort don't have to be like so expensive or time consuming to figure something like this out. You can sit down, and even with tools like ChatGPT these days, you can come up with ideas. And so like me buying the stuff, one of the things that I bought was like slip-on shoes, because I was like, sometimes I might need to go out to a pizza place and pick up dinner or something, and I might have already changed. So slip-on shoes that are really easy to just put on and run out or whatever, and pajama pants that look like regular pants, sort of, so that if I go out, it's not a big deal. So these are the types of things that I think would be useful for people. Again, maybe it's not comfort for someone, but maybe it's convenience or something else that will help them. It's just a matter, get clear first on what it is that will actually help you feel that confidence. And then how can you, it might seem too expensive or crazy to do. How can you simplify it, at least for now? And then maybe down the line, do extra steps.
Yeah. I love your examples. And sure, like a lot of what you distinguish is that it's about comfort, but comfort is just one example of a transition. I think, like there's like a transitional energy there, right? Your wife comes home, she gets comfortable. You were like, hey, let me try this out. You got out of your more, formal wear or whatever, your work attire, and then you transitioned into a different gear. So even though on some level going from, more formal to less formal is kind of like a universal construct. Who doesn't feel good when they're comfortable? It doesn't necessarily have to be about like less formal, right? Maybe it's not even about clothing at all. Maybe it's just sitting, maybe it's like you go, go, go throughout the day. And then even in the same clothes, you just like give yourself 5 minutes or a half an hour, an hour, whatever you say to whatever. I mean, whether it's, for some people it's watching Netflix. For other people, it's like getting on
Napping.
a call and connecting with a friend. For somebody, it might just be, honestly, it might be just sitting quietly and having like rehydrating and having some lemon water. Like it doesn't really matter what the thing is, but what you're doing is you're basically saying to your mind, like, okay, we're not in that container anymore. We're now over here in this container. And it works in both directions. We're talking about kind of notching down into comfort, but think about how it goes the other way when a performer enters the audition. You want to kind of notch up, right? You may be informal in the way you've been rehearsing, but now you're getting in front of the camera and you want to be sharper. Or like an athlete who's in a practice now, like is, it's game day. So like they actually put on the real uniform because they play better in the actual game day uniform. So I think it's just the messages that we send to ourselves and the different gears and containers we operate in that help us show up in a way that's just useful in the moment for what it is we're looking for, whether it be rest, relaxation, and unplugging, or sharpening ourselves to be more effective in a given space.
You want to be intentional. What
Intentional.
are the thing, and then sit down and actually just kind of put some effort into thinking about it, you
Which
know?
is why visualization is also great. Like Olympic skiers and figure skaters will close their eyes and go through the routine or see themselves go down the mountain before they even do it, because the mind doesn't know the difference between what we feed it, either because we're through real experience or because we close our eyes and we mentally give the images to ourselves. And it's the same thing with performance. We talked about resilience a little while ago. I think we can physically get ourselves uncomfortable by getting out of our comfort zone, but you can actually close your eyes and almost put butterflies in your stomach. Like imagine what it's like to be in that nervous place. See yourself on a stage in front of thousands of people, including theater critics. Whatever it is for you, whatever it is for a given person that like will really put them on edge. The more reps you have there, the less uncomfortable it's going to be. It kind of cultivates a callus the way somebody playing a guitar for the first time, their fingers are sensitive and they might even bleed. But after a month of playing, you have this callus. It doesn't really hurt. And even though we want to remain sensitive as performers, of course, you don't want to just be tough. It's really about, being sort of uncomfortable on purpose and sort of being still within a range of discomfort, not being so overwhelmingly scared that it's performance hindering. We want those kind of like nervous energy, to a little bit of it, to sharpen us into performing at our best.
Mm.
So
My last main question for you here is, what can actors sort of take away if there's some sort of like real, let's say small thing that they can do. Obviously, we've shared lots of strategies and different things, but some sort of, whether it's a coaching exercise or some sort of mental reset or anything that they could kind of use and implement before auditions or like an important meeting that they are getting the butterflies type of feeling. Is there anything there that you're open to sharing for people?
sure. I think that so much of performing is about presence, right? A lot of times we think that we have to do something, we have to like go and do the thing. And of course, there are lines to read or recite. There are like marks to hit on camera. So there is definitely action to take. But all of those actions, or at a networking event, it's like crossing the room and talking to someone, or but all of those actions sit on top of who we're being energetically. And so we want a sense of presence. And I think that's related to being like fresh. When you're fresh and you have access, just like whether you stepped out of a shower or you got a good night's sleep, you feel like refreshed. And it kind of reminds me of if you've ever shopped for like perfume or cologne, the first couple register on the olfactory nerve. By the time you get to like 4 or 5, they all just start to kind of smell the same, because your olfactory nerve is like overstimulated and you can't tell those different notes that were purposefully put into the fragrance. So you'll see little containers of coffee beans on the glass counter and they invite you to take a coffee bean and smell it. And what that does is it sort of resets the olfactory nerve. And now the next fragrance you smell is going to be, you're going to catch all those little nuances. So I would ask myself, what is my coffee bean? What do I need? Athletes will put music in their ears during warm-ups to kind of like gear up their emotional, like to get psyched up before they take the court. So maybe it's music. Maybe it's a beverage you like. Maybe it's a food. Maybe it's connecting with a friend. Maybe it's like, I don't know, maybe it's nature sounds. Maybe it's just like, some people get really peaceful and they love to hear the beach or birds chirping in a forest or something. But find a way to kind of round yourself out, get those needs met, and refresh yourself. Because at the end of the day, the best thing that you could bring into an audition room, a networking conversation, or really anything is you. So you have to have full access to yourself. And if you're tired or hungry or annoyed you're kind of on tilt, you'll bring yourself, but you're not going to bring all of yourself. And you're going to miss a question. Somebody's going to ask you something and you're going to miss probably the better answer that you could have given, or the better the better performance. It may not be as sharp or clean. It may not be right in the center of what they asked when they give you feedback and have you readjust. So just, go in with as much access to you as you possibly can, so you can be present and you can deliver not just what they want, but what you have to give. Because that's the one unique gift that no other performer that's auditioning has, is you.
Nice. Awesome. I love it. Well, that is for the most part all the main questions that I had, but what are you open to sharing your info, or if like actors are interested in learning more about what you
Sure.
do or coaching with you? And we'll also include your info as well in the episode description and information there.
For sure. You want me to just share?
Yeah, anything that you want to share.
So the best way to reach me is you can reach me by email, which is Corey@anchorline.com, Corey @anchorline, AN like Nancy, KER line, LINE.com, Corey@anchorline.com. For fastest response, you can shoot me a text, 917-488-7699. And I'm on the socials too, but those are probably the most direct. These two are probably the most direct ways to get to me. And feel free if you have a question that comes up, from anything that was said here today, and you want me to unpack it with you a little further, I'm happy to do that.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much. This was such an amazing interview. Really have fun. I love talking about there's a lot that goes into how people operate. It's not just the what do you do? It's the how does my brain work properly to make me either do or decide not to do and follow through. And so all of that stuff is more important than anything. And you're an expert on that. So thank you so much for sharing.
My pleasure. Always good to be with you, Martin. Thanks. Thanks for the conversation.
Well, thanks for listening. Now, if you want to learn more, I highly recommend checking out a related episode that I did called How a Mentor Can Help You Land SAG-AFTRA Roles and Level Up Your Acting Game. That's episode number 191. I think it's a great follow-up to this, and it covers some practical steps that you can take to get someone to help support you in your acting journey for free. So again, that's episode number 191, How a Mentor Can Help You Land SAG-AFTRA Roles and Level Up Your Acting Game, right here on the Actor's Career Compass. Thanks so much, and I'll see you soon.